According to ESPN's Cleveland Tony Grossi, the full list of demands are $20 million per year, a $10 million staff budget, total authority over the roster, and would like to select his own GM.
That's not a bad thing, especially for somebody like Harbaugh.
If you thought the NFL draft was sacred, think again. Because tonight, the league's most powerful owners are losing sleep, losing control, and allegedly losing the grip they've had for decades. This isn't just a coaching rumor. This isn't just contract drama. This is a full-blown system shock. And it all traces back to one explosive move that nobody was supposed to make. If you thought you'd seen it all, think again. This is Spill News, where secrets don't leak, they detonate. Behind closed doors, whispers started turning into panic. Phones started buzzing. Meetings got real quiet. And suddenly, one name was being mentioned in rooms where it never belonged. A coach with leverage, a quarterback with timing, and a draft system that suddenly looked a lot more fragile than anyone wanted to admit. The internet couldn't believe it, and you won't either. Because here's the real question. If you were in this position, same power, same pressure, same chance to rewrite the rules, would you play along or would you burn the whole system down? Blogs started hinting. Group chats went crazy. One anonymous message summed it up perfectly. Bro said too much, and now they can't stop it. This isn't just about football. This is about control, ego, legacy. And trust me, once we break this down, it gets uglier. The first thing people need to understand is that this didn't start with a contract. It started with silence. The kind of silence that only exists when powerful people are pretending not to notice something they're absolutely terrified of. For weeks, nothing was said publicly. No press conferences, no denials, no carefully worded leaks to friendly reporters.
Who speculates on what he's heard about Harbaugh's prerequisites to even be interested in your job.
Okay.
$20 million a year.
Not a problem.
Not a problem. $10 million.
Just quiet. And in the NFL, silence is never accidental. Silence is strategy. Behind that silence, the tension was already boiling. Owners were already calling each other. Front offices were already scrambling. And a few insiders were already whispering the same sentence over and over again, this isn't normal. Because when a coach with real credibility starts asking for real power, it forces everyone else to look in the mirror. And a lot of people in this league don't like what they see. The story everyone thought they were watching was simple. Veteran coach, end of a long run, maybe a graceful exit, maybe a quiet transition into another role. That's what the league expected. That's what the owners planned for. But that's not what happened. Instead, what happened was something much more dangerous. Control shifted, leverage flipped, and suddenly the people who normally dictate the rules were the ones reacting. It started with conversations that were never meant to leave the room. Late night calls, closed door meetings, trusted intermediaries passing messages back and forth. And one of those messages, according to people familiar with the situation, landed like a grenade. A list, not a suggestion, not a wish list, a list of non-negotiables. Salary, staff budget, authority, and most importantly, autonomy. That's when the mood changed. Because this wasn't a coach begging for a job. This was a coach dictating terms. And the league is built on the idea that no one person,
Total authority over the roster. And also would like to select his own guy to lean on, personnel guy.
especially not a coach, ever gets to do that. Owners run the league. General managers run the rosters. Coaches are supposed to stay in their lane. That's the system. Or at least, that was the system. What made this even more unsettling was the timing. The draft clock was already ticking. Quarterback conversations were already happening. Teams were already positioning themselves for the future. And then this dropped, not publicly, but internally. And internally, it shook everything. Because the demands weren't random. They were targeted, specific, built around a very particular vision of how a franchise should be run. That's when one name started floating around more often than anyone expected. Not officially, not in press releases, but in side conversations, in text messages, in late-night group chats between executives who thought no one was listening. A young quarterback, polarizing, talented, media-ready, and, most importantly, not yet owned by the system the way most players are by the time they enter the league. Here's the part fans don't always see. The draft isn't just about talent. It's about control. It's about timelines. It's about leverage. Teams don't just draft players. They draft contracts. They draft years of influence. They draft the ability to shape a career before that player ever understands the business they've stepped into. And when someone threatens that balance, the reaction is never calm. Quietly, blogs started posting vague hints. Analysts started talking around the issue, without naming it directly. Social media caught fragments of conversations that didn't quite make sense on their own. Someone tweeted that this changes everything, and then deleted an hour later. Another account claimed there was panic behind the scenes and got ratioed into oblivion, but the noise kept building. One anonymous message, shared in a private forum and later screenshotted, summed it up better than any headline ever could. It said, "This isn't about football, this is about who's in charge next." That's when people started connecting dots. Because if a coach is demanding total authority, and if that authority lines up perfectly with the arrival of a high-profile quarterback, then the implications get uncomfortable fast. It suggests planning. It suggests foresight. And for some owners, it suggests something dangerously close to manipulation. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, nothing about this was ever confirmed. No documents were leaked. No contracts were posted online. Everything lived in the gray area, where speculation thrives. But that gray area is exactly where power struggles reveal themselves. And the reactions told a story all on their own. Executives who normally never speak publicly suddenly had strong opinions. Former players were asked about it on podcasts and gave answers that felt carefully measured. And one media personality laughed it off a little too hard before saying, "If this is real, the league's got a problem." That clip went viral for about 12 hours before being buried under breaking news about something else entirely. The most interesting part wasn't what was being said. It was who wasn't saying anything at all. Certain teams went completely quiet. No leaks, no commentary, no denials. That kind of restraint usually means lawyers are involved, or negotiations, or both. And then there was the reaction from fans. Half of them saw this as a power grab. Ego, arrogance, a coach trying to become bigger than the league itself. The other half saw something else entirely. A system finally being challenged. A chance for a player to walk into the league with protection instead of promises. A rare moment where someone with leverage decided to actually use it. Online, the arguments got personal fast. People accused each other of bias, of favoritism, of not understanding how the league really works. But underneath all that noise was a much simpler fear. If this works once, it can work again. And if it works again, the draft stops being a safety net for owners and starts becoming a negotiation battlefield. That's why this felt different. Not loud, not explosive, just unsettling. Because the NFL can handle scandals. It can handle controversies. It can even handle public embarrassment. What it doesn't handle well is uncertainty. And this introduced a level of uncertainty that no amount of PR could smooth over. By the time the first mainstream reports finally acknowledged that something unusual was happening, the internal damage was already done. Trust had been shaken. Lines had been crossed. And a question that no one wanted to answer was now hanging over the league like a storm cloud. What happens if a coach really does get everything he's asking for? Because if that happens, the next question becomes unavoidable. Who's actually in control of the draft anymore? And as those conversations intensified behind closed doors, as more names started to surface and more quiet assurances started to fall apart, one thing became clear to everyone paying close attention. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just a moment before everything spilled into the open. It was only a matter of time before the quiet collapsed, because silence in a league this loud doesn't last forever. And when it finally broke, it didn't come from an official statement or a press conference. It came from leaks, screenshots, side comments that were never meant to be amplified. The kind of information that slips out when too many people know too much and someone decides they're tired of holding the bag. The first leak wasn't flashy. It was a paragraph buried deep inside a blog post, framed as lead chatter. No names, no confirmation, just a suggestion that a major coaching negotiation was tied to a specific draft scenario. Most people scrolled right past it, but the ones who mattered didn't, because the wording was careful, too careful, and that's usually how you can tell something's real. Then came the DMs. Not real ones, not verified ones, but the kind that circulate in screenshots with usernames blurred out and timestamps cropped. Messages claiming that a deal was already being discussed before anyone publicly acknowledged it. Messages suggesting that certain teams were furious not because of the money, but because of the precedent. One line kept showing up again and again, almost word for word across different accounts. This changes how the draft works. That's when the speculation turned darker, because now the question wasn't whether a coach was asking for too much power. The question was whether that power had already been quietly promised. And if it had, who else knew? And who else had been left out? Suddenly, the same names kept popping up in completely different conversations. Analysts talking about draft stock would casually mention a coaching situation. Podcasters debating quarterback rankings would pivot into long pauses, followed by phrases like, "if the rumors are true." Even fan pages started posting cryptic messages, acting like they were on something bigger than highlights and stats. One fake investigative thread claimed that back-channel meetings had already taken place weeks before the season ended. According to that thread, representatives had been discussing not just salary, but structure, who reports to who signs off on what, how insulated a quarterback could be from front office interference. The thread was quickly deleted, but not before it was archived and reposted everywhere. And then came the reactions, or more accurately, the overreactions. Some owners, according to unnamed insiders, were livid, not because they couldn't afford the money, but because they saw where this could lead. If one coach gets this level of control tied to a quarterback, what happens when the next star prospect demands the same thing? What happens when agents start packaging players with coaches? What happens when the draft stops being about parity and starts being about leverage deals behind closed doors? One executive was quoted in a now-deleted post saying, "We didn't sign up for this version of the league." Another supposedly joked, "Might as well let players draft the teams next." The jokes didn't land. The anxiety was too real. Meanwhile, fans were watching a completely different show. To them, this looked like justice. Like someone finally calling out a system that chews up young talent and spits them out. The idea that a quarterback could enter the league with a coach fully invested in protecting him felt revolutionary. Social media started framing it as player empowerment, even though it was technically a coach making the move. Of course, not everyone was buying it. Critics flooded comment sections, accusing everyone involved of manipulation, of gaming the system, of turning the draft into a backstage deal-making circus. One viral tweet said, "So now we're pretending this isn't collusion?" Another replied, "It's only collusion when owners do it." The sarcasm only made things worse. Then the celebrity reaction started. Former players, media personalities, people with platforms big enough to shift narratives but small enough to avoid consequences. Some laughed it off, calling it smoke with no fire. Others leaned in, saying this was the most honest thing they'd seen in years. One particularly blunt comment went viral after someone said, "Y'all mad because the rules finally stopped working in your favor." But behind all of this noise, the most explosive claims were still circulating quietly. Claims that a leaked audio clip existed. Claims that someone had recorded part of a conversation they weren't supposed to. Claims that certain draft plans had already been adjusted internally based on the assumption that this deal would happen. None of it was proven. All of it was believable enough to keep spreading. And that's when another name surfaced. Not a coach, not an owner, someone adjacent. Someone who'd been around long enough to understand how things really work. According to multiple fake reports, this person had warned that if the league didn't shut this down early, it would open a door they'd never be able to close again. That warning allegedly went ignored. Or worse, it was dismissed as fear-mongering. The situation escalated fast after that. Blogs stopped hedging. Headlines got bolder. Words like crisis and power shift started appearing in mainstream coverage. One outlet even floated the idea that the league office might step in if things went too far. That rumor alone sent social media into a frenzy, because if the league office intervenes, that means something is actually wrong. At the center of it all was the same uncomfortable truth. This wasn't about whether a coach deserved the money. This wasn't about whether a quarterback had talent. This was about control, about who gets to decide the future before it happens. And the fact that this conversation was even happening meant the balance had already been disturbed. As more alleged details leaked out, the picture became clearer and uglier. The demands weren't just about winning. They were about insulation, about ensuring that if things went wrong, blame wouldn't be scattered across a dozen departments. One voice, one vision, one chain of command. That scared a lot of people, because the NFL thrives on shared blame, on committees, on plausible deniability. Take that away, and suddenly accountability becomes very real. The most damning rumor of all was the idea that other teams had tried to replicate the strategy and failed, that they quietly explored similar arrangements in the past and been shut down immediately. The implication was obvious. This wasn't about fairness. This was about timing and leverage. And if that was true, then the outrage made sense. By the time late-night shows started joking about it, the damage was already done. What began as whispers had turned into a full-blown narrative. A narrative where the league looked fragile, where owners looked reactive, and where the draft, once considered untouchable, suddenly felt negotiable. But just when everyone thought they understood the scope of the scandal, when people assumed the worst had already leaked, another detail surfaced that reframed everything. Because buried beneath the money, beneath the power struggle, beneath the leaked messages and fake reports, there was one more element no one had fully accounted for. And once that name entered the conversation, it became clear this story wasn't just about contracts anymore. It was about fallout. It was about fallout. Because once the idea took hold that the situation had crossed from rumor into possibility, the consequences started to surface everywhere. Not all at once, not explosively, but in subtle shifts that only people paying close attention would notice. Conversations that stopped mid-sentence, decisions that got delayed without explanation, meetings that were postponed indefinitely. The kind of behavior that tells you something big is being renegotiated behind the scenes. According to multiple alleged insiders, at least one front office initiated an internal review of its own draft strategy, not because anything had been confirmed, but because they didn't want to be caught unprepared if the rules of engagement suddenly changed. Another fake report claimed the team quietly reached out to the league office asking for clarification on what would and wouldn't be permitted in future negotiations. That question alone raised eyebrows, because you don't ask for clarification unless you think the line might already be blurry. Meanwhile, the pressure on the central figures intensified. Every interview became a minefield. Every public appearance was dissected frame by frame. Even casual comments were treated like coded messages. People weren't listening to what was being said. They were listening to what wasn't being denied. The quarterback at the center of the speculation stayed mostly quiet. No long statements, no emotional posts, just a few carefully chosen words here and there. Focused, calm, almost detached. To some, that silence felt strategic. To others, it felt ominous. Because when someone with that much attention says very little, it forces everyone else to fill in the blanks. Fans split into camps almost overnight. One side framed the entire situation as a necessary correction, a long overdue disruption of a system that had always favored ownership over talent. They argued that if teams could manipulate timelines, contracts, and narratives, then why shouldn't someone finally flip the board? The other side saw it as chaos disguised as empowerment, a dangerous experiment that could destabilize the league and hurt players who had nothing to do with the deal. And then there were the neutral observers, the ones who didn't care about loyalty or tradition. They only cared about outcomes. Their question was simple. If this actually works, what happens next? That's where the fear really set in. Because once a precedent exists, it doesn't stay isolated. Agents adapt, players learn, coaches reassess their leverage. Suddenly, the idea of a standard process starts to feel more like a suggestion than a rule. And for a league built on predictability and control, that's a nightmare scenario. One particularly viral fake commentary put it bluntly: this is how empires crack. Not with rebellion, with exceptions. That line spread fast, screenshotted, quoted, debated, mocked, but it stuck because it captured the unease perfectly. Behind closed doors, the tone reportedly shifted from outrage to calculation. Instead of asking how to stop it, people started asking how to survive it. If the draft really was becoming more negotiable, then the smartest move wasn't to fight it publicly. It was to adapt quietly. And adaptation always favors those with the most resources. That realization hit fans hard, because the same system they thought was being challenged might just evolve into something even less transparent. Deals layered on top of deals. Power concentrated in fewer hands. The illusion of choice masking a deeper imbalance. Emotionally, the weight of it all started to show. Commentators who initially laughed it off became more serious. Analysts hedged their language. Even critics who had dismissed the whole thing as fake drama began acknowledging that something fundamental had shifted. Not confirmed, not finalized, but shifted. And then came the rumors of retaliation. Nothing overt, nothing that could be proven, just whispers that certain people would remember who pushed too far, that future opportunities might quietly disappear. That being difficult in a league this small has consequences that don't show up on paper. Whether those rumors were real or not almost didn't matter. The fear alone was enough to shape behavior. The most tragic part of all this wasn't the controversy itself. It was the realization that no matter how this played out, someone was going to pay the price. If the deal fell apart, it would be framed as a cautionary tale, proof that challenging the system doesn't work. If it succeeded, it would become a blueprint that others would try to copy, possibly with far less integrity. As the weeks went on, the noise slowly died down, not because answers emerged, but because attention moved on. Another scandal, another headline, another distraction. That's how these stories usually end. Not with resolution, but with exhaustion. But the consequences don't disappear just because people stop talking about them. Somewhere behind the scenes, decisions have been altered, relationships strained, trust recalculated. The league might look the same on Sundays, but underneath, something had cracked. And cracks have a way of spreading long after the cameras are gone. The coach at the center of it all reportedly remained unfazed, calm, calculated, unapologetic. According to one alleged source, he believed the conversation itself was the victory, that even if nothing materialized exactly as planned, the message had been sent, and messages like that don't get unsent. As for the quarterback, the speculation never really stopped. Every performance, every comment, every decision now carried extra weight. Fair or not, he had become a symbol of possibility, of disruption, of a future that didn't quite fit into the old boxes. In the end, there was no dramatic press conference, no explosive reveal, no final verdict handed down by the league. Just a lingering sense that something important had almost happened, or maybe it happened quietly without anyone fully realizing it yet. Because sometimes the biggest scandals aren't the ones that blow up on screen. They're the ones that change how decisions get made when no one is watching. And long after the headlines fade, long after the rumors cool off, long after the league insists everything is back to normal, those changes remain. Unseen, unspoken, waiting for the next moment when someone decides to push the system just a little too far again. And that's the part nobody wants to sit with. Because whether this deal happens exactly the way people expect or quietly falls apart behind closed doors, the damage is already done. The questions have been asked. The lines have been tested. An illusion that everything in this league runs on clean, predictable rules is officially gone. This wasn't just a rumor. It wasn't just internet noise. It was a stress test, a moment where the system was forced to show how fragile it really is when someone with leverage decides not to play along. And now every coach, Every agent, every young quarterback coming into this league is watching closely because they all want to know the same thing. What happens when you stop asking for permission? So now the real conversation begins. Not in boardrooms, not in press conferences, but right here. If you were in that position, would you protect your future at all costs, or would you trust a system that's failed so many before you? Are these demands a power grab that threatens the integrity of the league, or are they the blueprint for finally building teams the right way? And if this works even once, does the draft ever look the same again? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear every angle. The supporters, the skeptics, the people who think this is genius, and the people who think it's madness. And make sure you hit that subscribe button because this story is far from over. The reactions are still coming. The fallout is still unfolding. And the next update might change everything you thought you knew about how this league really works. Stay locked in. We'll be right here when the next piece drops.